Hey Bio 1 students, I hope this finds you well, and I thought we would just start with a little welcome work. So try to explain what would happen if two mouse species tried to occupy the same niche in a meadow. Now, we'll talk exactly about what a niche means, but a niche is specific to a single population. And so if two different populations are trying to inhabit that same niche, then one of them is either going to need to change their niche and either move somewhere else or eat something else or whatever, or one of those populations is going to die and go away. And so those are kind of the two options that happens when two populations try to occupy the same niche. Okay, so we're talking about habitats, niches, or niches if you want to be French, and species interactions here. Okay, so a habitat is an area with a particular combination of physical and biological or abiotic and biotic factors that affect which organisms can live within it. So, not everything can live at the same temperatures or the same pHs or, in water versus in the air versus on land. Those are all habitats. Okay, a niche is, and I'm going to get my pen going. So a niche is basically the range and the way it obtains the resources it needs. Okay, so I think about a niche as an organism's or a species' address. So where does it live? And its occupation. What's its job in the ecosystem? And kind of like where would it be in the food web? So you might talk about different species having different, the Cape May warbler is going to live in the top of the spruce tree, while the bay-breasted warbler is going to live in the middle, and the yellow-rumped warbler is going to live in the base of the tree. And you can imagine a time when these three different populations were all trying to survive in a single location, and it just doesn't work. The competitive exclusion principle says that no two populations can occupy exactly the same niche and exactly the same habitat at exactly the same time. And so they either have to move, diversify what they're eating, or leave or die, I guess. Okay, so let's practice. How does a niche relate to a climate zone? Well, hopefully in what you wrote, you said something about that where an organism lives is part of its niche, and that's exactly right. So a climate zone would be also defining, what part of the earth that that thing is living in. Okay, if my daughter were awake right now, she would be saying, "Oh my gosh, it's Nemo and Marlin living in their anemone." Now, what y'all might know is that anemones have some stinging properties, but clownfish don't feel the stings. And anemones don't do a great job of keeping themselves clean, but clownfish will clean them up. And so this is an example of a really great community interaction. Okay, so commensalism is a relationship where one organism benefits and the other is harmed, or sorry, is neither helped nor harmed. So here we've got commensalism down here, and you're kind of thinking of two organisms. And commensalism, one, it's good, it's really good. That's why this relationship is happening. The other maybe doesn't notice that it's happening. It's just chilling. Mutualism, this is mutualism, where both species benefit. So it's good for the clownfish and it's good for the anemone. Parasitism is where it's good for one and it's bad for the other. So a parasite might be some sort of tapeworm that is loving living in someone's intestines because it's taking nutrients that person is eating, but that person is having a really bad time of it because they aren't getting the nutrients they think they're eating. There are some other community interactions that we've kind of mentioned, that a predator-prey relationship and an herbivore-plant relationship, which are really very similar. It's just different trophic levels. And it's pretty obvious that predator-prey is good for the predator, herbivore-plant is good for the herbivore. In the moment, it's bad for the prey or the plant that gets eaten, obviously, for that individual organism. But sometimes it's actually good for the population. So having a predator-prey relationship can keep a population in check, and thus it's less susceptible to density-dependent limiting factors. So, everybody can live better together in that population when there are more resources, basically. And this is kind of showing an example of that a little bit, that basically this is what will happen over time in a predator-prey relationship. The prey population will go up and the predator population will go up as well. This very much relates to what we were talking about with modeling energy flow in ecosystems. So like the more prey or herbivore energy and biomass that are available, the more predators it can support, the more consumers or higher level consumers it can support. But then those predators start eating all the prey, and so their population crashes. Soon after, the predators have nothing to eat, so their population crashes. And then when the predators are back down, the prey will go up. When the cat's away, the mice will play, something like that. So it follows this curve where the prey increases and then the predator population increases. And there's like one cycle where both of them go up and down following one another. All right, here's another practice question. How is mutualism similar to and different from commensalism? So mutualism is where both species benefit. Commensalism, one species benefits and the other just doesn't care. It's not negative, it just doesn't care. It's like it doesn't notice that this relationship is happening. Okay, the next thing we have to talk about is what's going on with these habitats where all these things are interacting. And we're going to talk about something called succession. There's a picture of a volcano here because what we're talking about usually is what happens to habitats when something disastrous happens and they have to kind of like start back from the beginning. And volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, hurricanes, and a lot of human-made things are causes for succession to occur. Okay, so ecological succession happens over time. It's a series of predictable events that occur in that community over time. So if you start with a bare rock, you will eventually, over time, come to a full functioning ecosystem. A climax community is what we call it. And obviously that's going to take a lot of time, but the predictability of it is based on, where we are, what things are nearby, and what kind of species interactions take place within that ecosystem. Primary succession happens over a really long time. So it takes over 115 years to go from barren rock to climax community. I'm just going to write that, climax community. Basically, like this is as good as it is going to get. And if there were to be another disastrous event in this area and it would like go back all the way to this barren rock, you would expect for the most part that in another 115 years, you would get to a very similar climax community, all things remaining equal. So succession begins in areas that have no remnants of an older community. So this is just abiotic factors. There's no biotic things there. There are then, the first step are these pioneer species like lichens that come onto the barren rocks. Something really neat, if you have time, I will offer extra credit if you and maybe some of your family want to go to Arabia Mountain and take a picture of some of the lichens that are pioneer species on Arabia Mountain. It's a really great hike to go to the top of the mountain. It's pretty easy. And you can see this happening. It's super cool. Okay, so pioneer species are the first ones to colonize barren areas. And that if that step is already done, so let's say a hurricane comes in, it doesn't like wipe everything down to bare rock. It just like destroys most of the tall trees and there's not really many shrubs. What you might have is called secondary succession. So you have like some biotic things, you got like little seedlings or something. And then it will again return to that climax community, but it'll take way less time. Remember, it was 115 or more years for primary succession when we're starting with bare rock, but it's 40 or so years still. So that's why it's like really devastating when you think about a hurricane coming into, certain parts of our region here. There are lots of hurricanes, and what that does not only to where humans are living, but natural ecosystems as well. Okay, so secondary succession occurs when a disturbance affects an existing community, but there's still some remnants of it. Timescale is really different. Okay, so that climax community is a specific, uniform, and stable community at the quote unquote end of succession. Now, evolution is still going to be happening there, and it could change, but only if the abiotic factors were to change, temperature or something like that. Now, there is a big if. There's some recent research that shows that climax communities are not always that uniform and stable, mostly because of human impact. So a climax community is going to be really different if all of a sudden there's a whole lot more carbon dioxide in the air, or if there's like runoff of fertilizer and there are like tons of nitrogens and phosphates that are in the ground now that weren't there before. So it's really hard to know what will happen after human caused disturbances. So you might think of like, oh, there was this beautiful forest and then we like crushed it and built a mall. Well, what happens now that that mall is like deserted? So is there going to be a return to that climax community, that forest that we tore down, or what? Like, what's going to happen? What does all this cement do to the ecosystem? And we still kind of don't know right now. The jury is still out, and we'll see probably in your lifetime what will actually happen. This is just a list of some of the really awesome things that ecosystems do for their environment, for biodiversity. So purifying water, buffering the effects of weather, pollinating, regulating pests, food production, nutrient cycling, maintaining soil structure. And I just thought it would be cool for you to tell me which of these 7 things is the most important to you that ecosystems do for everyone, but for us. And tell me why. All right. I hope this finds you well, and I'll talk to you soon.